Hi, I'm Brian Stevens, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Studio Test Kitchen. I really appreciate you being here. If this is your first time, this is where we try out all kinds of new products. What's hot, what's cool, what's brand new, or what's a little outside on the fringe. That's what Studio Test Kitchen is for. If you saw episode number 1, you saw me unbox this 8x14 Black Brass Snare Drum from Drum Supply out of Nashville, Tennessee. And in today's episode, I'm actually going to put this drum together for you. I want to take all the mystery out of it. I want to show you how easy it is to put together your own snare drum from a box of parts. So we're going to get started. As you'll see, we've got these chrome over brass tube lugs, and it's real simple. You only need 2 tools, from what I can see, to put this entire thing together. You need a screwdriver and you need a drum key. So I'm just going to work from there. And all I've got to do is just attach the tube lug. There's no grommets or anything to go between that tube lug and the drum. I'm just going to go hand tight on one of these, and I'm going to go hand tight on another one. And the reason I just go hand tight until I get them both in there is so that I make sure that I get this pretty well centered on the shell. And then once those are as tight as I can get them with my hand, I'm just going to take my screwdriver and tighten this down the rest of the way. Now be careful, don't over tighten this. Go just as tight as you need to put a little friction in that connection between the lug and the shell. If you try and tighten this too tightly, you risk stripping something out, whether it's stripping out the X in the Phillips head or stripping out the actual threads on the tube lugs. One of the reasons why you want to put these in by hand to start with too is so that you don't accidentally cross thread something. If you start torquing on it from the very beginning with the screwdriver, it's not hard to push through on something that's cross-threaded. But if you've got to tighten it by hand, a lot less chance that you're going to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, this is just me giving me my honest opinion. This is not the first drum I've assembled in my life, so I'm no stranger to doing this. I'm going to go back and set those to the side and see if I can get another set to work in this hole. Alright, so let's try just a whole nother set all together. Again, I'm going to hand tighten this thing, get it started. Yep. So that did okay. Okay, well, that set did all right. So I go back to my original statement. Always hand tighten as much as you can before you use the screwdriver. And the other thing is, once I do start using the screwdriver, I don't screw one down entirely and then work on the other. I sort of work on them in tandem. So I get one screw down just a little ways, to make sure it's sitting in there pretty well. And then I work on the next one. I will say with these, I'm a little surprised I'm having to torque as much as I am to get that seated in there, because right now that is a little loose compared to where I'd like it to be, and I shouldn't have to really wrench down on the thing. to get the last few turns out of it. Because what's happening is if I don't watch it, I'm going to strip the screw out. Yeah. So. All right, well that's fairly tight. I'm gonna see if I can get a little more out of this. I told you at the beginning this was not a paid advertisement for Drum Supply House or this product. The question you have to ask yourself when you're looking at not only the difference in the finish between, say, this and the pork pie option that you could get for $400, you have to ask yourself, do you like sitting here and working on a piece of gear? Do you like sitting here assembling this snare drum? Do you like putting the parts together? Do you like sometimes if it's a little frustrating? Do you like breaking a sweat while you put this thing together on camera? You see, that went on like a dream. That was beautiful. That one was a beautiful one. I'll give you that one. That one went on just perfectly. That's when the hole was off just a little bit. All right, so I don't know if there's a way, maybe we can get it in the GoPro here. I do have a few holes where the hardware doesn't completely line up. Like with this one, the hardware's not completely lining up with the hole. Now, I could try and torque it and try and put it, you're not gonna torque this brass. Just try and get it in there. What I know I'm gonna have to do is probably take a Dremel and try and get myself a little bit more play in there. So this one cut is a few mils off, just like the other cut was a few mils off. So I'm gonna keep going, because if I'm gonna have to Dremel one or more of these, yeah, the two right side by side each other are a little bit off. So I'm gonna Dremel those. So 3 of these. Let's just see if I find a different lug that, well, okay, well that tube lug fit right in that one, so, all right. Maybe it's a question of fitting the right tube lug into the right slot. I don't know. Seems like maybe there's no real rhyme or reason as to why that would be different. So that's 6 of 8 so far. Let's see if these other tube lugs fit those holes a little bit better. No, that one definitely not it. That one not quite it either. Okay, so let's try. Yeah, that one's a little off. And so's that one. I don't know if there's a way to show you in the camera, because I didn't really have myself set up for doing. I didn't expect this to become a problem. So what's happening is this hole right here was cut a little too far down, as was this one, or it may be the other side. So the top of this receptor for the screw is. If I put the bottom one in, the top one's not gonna get into the hole properly. Here, I'll show you from the other side. If I go this way with it, notice where I can't get the thing all the way through. It's because it wasn't cut quite high enough. So in both cases, if you wanted to send it back, you could send it back, knowing that I've waited a couple weeks to get this. And I'd like to finish this video now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Dremel, and I'm actually going to kind of Dremel away a little of this so that I can cut. And it's odd that they're right together too. That's kind of an odd thing that they're right there together. While my Dremel tool is charging up, I'm going to work on the next parts of this. We'll come back to the tube lugs. Let's look at this air vent. So this is a really nice air vent, actually. Put the grommet on there, and my guess is that the only hole big enough for this is going to be right on the side there. So I'm going to put that. I'm putting the grommet between this black plastic grommet goes between the shell and the outside of the air vent, and then we just hand tighten that down. You know, don't use a pair of pliers on this, or just as tight as you can get it with your hand. Should be perfectly fine. Now, it's pretty obvious which side goes where when it comes to the snare strainer, because the spacing of the screw holes here and the screw holes here, completely different. These are really reminiscent of the Ludwig snare strainer. I think they call it a P85, I guess it is. Same thing here. Once you get it into place, you're gonna have your washer and your lock washer right there. Hand tighten that down so that you don't accidentally strip anything. And then same thing, I'm just gonna line the hole up for the bottom. And yep, there we go. We're gonna hand tighten that. See it pulling into the side of the snare there. And then once I've got it fairly well hand tight, then I'll look at getting this snugged up with the screwdriver. And I keep going back to this idea of don't over tighten stuff. I've gotten drums that have been worked on that, you know, I'm replacing parts on, and I go to pull off the part that I'm trying to replace, like say a snare strainer, and it's pretty obvious that whoever had it before really just torqued it way beyond what it needed to be. Go enough to just get it nice and solid. Get a nice solid connection to do the job. With almost any snare drum you're gonna buy, whether something like this or something that's commercial, eventually you're gonna have to pull the heads off and you're gonna have to tighten this stuff anyway. It vibrates loose after a while. So I don't really see where there's a up or a down on this necessarily. It looks pretty universal, so I'm just gonna pick one and go. This one's a little lower profile than the Ludwig that I'm used to putting on drums. But it's cool. It's an attractive butt plate. Same thing. Sort of tighten one, tighten the other. Go between the two so you gradually snug that thing up against the drum. And when you feel like, yeah, you got it nice and tight, that's good. You don't need to over tighten this thing. Cool. That is the snare throw off. And as you can tell, it's just a real basic Ludwig style throw off. Nothing super fancy, but it's incredibly functional and pretty bulletproof. The thing will work time and time and time again. So the next step is going to be, let's try and Dremel these things out and make room for these other tube lugs now. Yeah, because they're not quite in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this, and I'm just going to make a slight little opening at the top of the circle, so it won't be a perfect circle like the band. It will be slightly oblong. Most of the tension is probably going to be on the bottom because that head stays pretty tight all the time. Probably going to put that give just a little bit on the top side of this. All right, I'm going to grab the Dremel and we're going to do that. Now the bit that I'm using is a bit that's meant to cut metal. So I'm just going to take my Dremel tool. Sounds like a scary thing to do. It's really not. I hate to have to do this to this drum, but I don't mind. It's not the first time I've had to do this to a drum that I was trying to put some hardware on. I'm just going to, again, we're just talking about a few mils. I'm just going to round up, open up the top of this. Probably shouldn't blow the metal shavings right into the camera, should I? Again, I'm gonna baby step this whole process. So I'm gonna do a little bit and see how much more I need to go. Not quite much. I may even take a little off of both sides just to try and make it as even as I can. Definitely made of brass. Let's go a little bit on this side. One thing I'll tell you about doing this kind of move is make sure that it's sitting pretty flat on the table and pretty secure. Still got a little ways to go though. So close. There we go. All right. Like I say, you take off just as much as you need. I only need that much to get it in there, and I took off from both sides so it would be fairly even when it went in. That looks pretty straight. Okay, good deal. And then, yeah, it looks like about the same here. So, like I say, I'm only widening the top of that hole a little bit on each side. It's no biggie. I think that did it. Let's look and see. So, yep, right. Right into that hole right there. Beautiful. And actually, it actually snugs it up kind of close there. And then this next one, yeah, goes right in. Okay, so let's go ahead and do what we did before, which is add our screws, hand tight. If this were an IKEA snare drum, they would put probably one extra tube lug in there and a few extra screws just in case something went south. But you had no idea that building a snare drum would be suspenseful, did you? Again, not going all the way down yet. Just taking each one as it comes, seeing how far how tight I can get that before I go to the other side, back and forth. This last one's got more play in it than I really want. So we're going to have to crank on it a little. Be careful. Push on that screw so you don't strip out the head. One thing you can do too, since these have sort of a hex sides to them, you could use like a small crescent wrench to do this tightening as well. May save you from stripping the screw out if you really got to get super tight on there. So these last two, I'm not sure why I need to get them so tight to snug up, but there we go. I'm trying not to put too much tension on there because I don't want it to push in on the shell too much, but it's got to be enough that it doesn't wiggle. So I think one more partial turn and we should be close. All right, now that we have all of the tube lugs on and we have the snare strainer and butt plate on, time to strap on some heads and get this thing going. So I'm going to turn this drum and put it so that the snares go this way. We'll start with the batter side. Put Put my G1 there, center my logo between those lugs. Now, I'm going to do two quick little things as I put each one of these tension rods on. I'm going to put just a skosh of Vaseline on the end of that. When I say a skosh, I mean just a little bit, not a ton. I'm going to do that. I probably should have done this first. I'm also going to put a black nylon washer on here. These have the regular metal washer on there that you can't really take off. I like these black nylon washers. I feel like I get a smoother tuning experience out of the drum. So between putting the Vaseline on the threads of the tension rod and having the nylon, there we go, the nylon washer there at the head, it just makes for a much smoother tuning experience. So like I said, just a little dab, not a ton. You don't want Vaseline to go everywhere all over you. The Vaseline, I find, really lubricates the threads and just makes it a lot easier to get that thing on there. Sometimes I need to get the drum key out to get that started. Yeah, there we go. Now it's starting to. All right, so let's keep going around. So the idea with all of these is let's just get them on there finger tight, all the way around, snug it up really good, and then we'll bring it up to tension. Maybe not full tension, but we'll get some tension on the head. There's all kinds of commercial products out there for lubricating these tension rods. They all kinds of different names, and you'll pay $20 for just a little, almost like a chapstick sized amount of it. Vaseline's just as fine. It does the job just as well. So once I've got all my tension rods in, I just kind of go around and make sure that I've got everything pretty well tight with my finger. I'm going to give it one half turn all the way across to really start getting tension on this drum. Now at a half turn, I'm already starting to hear where it is. I can even start getting it. It's a little higher, but that's cool. We'll go anywhere from a half to a third of a turn up on there, just to get more tension on the drum. I want to start hearing a pitch at this point. Let's go up a little with those. In there. So as I'm going, I'm trying to get the pitches to match between the pairs. You hear that's not quite right? You hear how that's low? Go just a little more on that. Definitely lower. And those two up. Okay, so now when I get this to a point where that wasn't hard to do at all. The tuning on that was actually rather easy for that side. Now, I'm just going to look and make sure that everything is nice and tight. I don't have anything that's rattling. Because once you put the heads on, man, anything that's rattling inside of there, it's going to be a pain in the butt to pull that stuff off and try and find where the rattle's coming from. Same thing with the snare side head. Seat that Evans head real nice. And then on the snare side head, make sure that your openings, your gates are in the right spot. And we're just going to repeat that process. One of the reasons I also only go finger tight on these tension rods when I'm first putting everything on is just like the screws that we use to hold on the hardware, you want to leave a little play at first, because as hard as we might to try and line up the hole in the rim with the hole that's underneath that receives the tension rod, as much as we may try and get it exactly straight, you may not have it exactly straight. So by leaving just a little bit of wiggle room there, you can wait until you've got all your tension rods in to know that everything's pushing straight down, that nothing's out of alignment. So it's another tip for you why you don't want to over tension these tension rods on first applying them. In some cases, if you don't apply the tension evenly going down, like with these snare side heads, you could run the risk of popping the head out if there's not even tension applied in small increments across the entire head. As you get up to tension, you can really mess that head up a lot. So it's a real delicate piece of mylar that's on the bottom side of these drums, so be cautious with them. Don't be afraid, but you got to be cautious at the same time. There we go. And you can start to see as I get finger tight, then I start to get a little bit of tension around. You start to see the more and more the wrinkles come out. All right, that's looking good. Just make sure we're finger tight all the way around on those two. You can see a lot of the wrinkles are starting to come out. Now, I'm not going to go full half turn. I'm probably going to do more like a quarter turn on this. A quarter to a third of a turn. Because again, this the snare head, a little more delicate. And in this tuning process, if you've never changed a drum head before, this is a good lesson for changing a drum head. I always do things in pairs. The different people will have different systems to how they put the pairs together. I always know that I can work opposite pairs, and that works pretty well, especially for something like this. I also know that on the bottom side snare head, I'm going to need to tighten a little bit more on the two pairs of tension rods that are in line with the snare bed. That's gonna they're gonna need that extra tension to get the wrinkles out of there. Hear the difference in the pitch there. Bring both those up. And then these are obviously lower than they need to be. The pairs that are on either side of the snare bed itself are always going to be a little bit lower when at the same tension. So you can either leave them a little bit lower, or if it doesn't cause me to over tighten the drum too much, I may try and bring them up to pitch with all the other pairs. But if they're a little bit lower, especially on a 10 lug drum, that's totally cool. One pair still seems to be a little low. That's pretty good. That really seems to be pretty dang close. Now you hear this head's popping a little bit as it's seating. Don't worry too much about that. Some brands of heads will maybe pop a little bit more than others, but that glue is going to crack a little bit as you bring it up to tension. Now, one thing you might want to do if you're uncertain about the pitch or the tensioning is you can always look around the edge to see if the head is seated pretty evenly all the way around the drum. If you look, and it looks like the head or the rim is a little tighter on one side than the other, then you need to even that tension out. I've seen that a lot, especially with students, where they'll have, especially the side that's closest to them on the batter side, I'll notice that there's that much of the thread that I can see on that side of the drum, whereas the other side of the drum I see a lot more thread. So the rim is actually further down. That can cause a lot of problems with warping the rim, with pulling heads out, with just having problems with tuning the drum all together. Now, before we can put the snares on, already, it's got a nice pure tone already. That's without a whole lot of work right there. All right, so now, the part that seems to be the mysterious part of this process for most everybody. I've seen this done so many different ways, and different drums and different throw-offs, I do it different ways as well. We'll see how this works out with this drum. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to let this tension knob out a bit so that I've got a fair amount of throw or a fair amount of distance I can go once I start tightening this tension knob. If you don't have nearly enough, you may find once you get the snares on that you don't have enough runway to get the tightest sound that you want. So you don't want it hanging off, but you want to give it a little bit of extra distance there. Now let's take a look at the snares that came with this package. These look really similar to the same kind of snares that come on a lot of different snare drums that I see, whether it's Gretsch or Ludwig or any of these other drums. Real similar kind of snare. So I'm going to set this thing pretty close to even across the board on top of the snare, and then I'm going to this drum seems like maybe it'll work best with the string. You can also use straps, nylon straps with these snares, but again, since it came with a string, I'm just going to use the string. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I put that string on, and once I get it in there, I want to pull some slack out of it a little bit, and I want to try and, as much as I can, line those ends up. You may not get it perfect, but that's okay. But I want to try and get close to the same amount of string on each side once it starts pulling into tension. And for now, I'm just going to set that into this strainer system. Just loosen that enough to get those strings to come down. I'm not going to tighten anything yet. I just want to get the strings in there. Same way on the other side. If you've never put a set of snares on before, you want to make sure that the welded side, in case these are welded to the clip, make sure that the welded side is down against the head so that the snares seat properly. If you put the top of the clip up, you'll instantly notice that the snares don't make adequate contact with the head, and no amount of tension is going to get it to be correct for you. So you guys have been playing a long time, already know that, but some of the young guys that I come across, whether it's students or just younger players, don't always realize that they've got their snares upside down. Alright, so I've got just about the same amount of string on either side, which is great. Now we're going to try and even this up. And I've seen guys do this a lot of different ways. I've seen guys that they'll put a stick under the snares and make their adjustments. There's all kinds of guys that do it different ways. I'll show you the way that I'm going to do it for these, which essentially involves pulling a little bit of tension on this. I actually pull around. If I have enough string, and in this case I don't have enough string to go all the way around, I'm going to pull around here, and then I'm going to put my knot on the bottom. I'm gonna do is try and center that up as much as I can. And I'm gonna put a knot in this. What seems about the right spot. And I may leave it a little loose, so just so I can tighten it up a little bit more, if need be. Then I'm gonna go to the other side. I'm gonna disengage, not engage. I'm gonna disengage the snares. I'm gonna do a similar thing where I'm gonna pull this towards me a bit. Kind of pull that out. And some people will actually wrap this around the screws. I'm gonna try this without wrapping it around the screws. Tighten that up just a little so it'll hold tension. And then for right this second, I'm not gonna make a complete knot. I'm just gonna do that much. Okay. Looking pretty good. Now I'm going to finger tighten this. And so far we're still centered over the drum pretty well. And I've got a little bit of play here. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to bring this in a little bit, tighten it up. And while I'm holding on to this, I'm going to go ahead and get some tension on the butt plate. Now right now I'm a little closer to this side, and because I've left myself a little bit of wiggle room, if I want to let that string out a little, I can, like there. I can let a little of the string out and then tighten down on top of that. I'm seeing a little bit of extra play right there that I don't like. So even that out a little. All right, now I'm also gonna kind of look at this drum on an angle and see, are my snares falling straight? And if they're not, that's where I'm going to start to make some adjustments. So I'm going to put this on an angle. Sometimes you can kind of prop it up with something. I just hold it up at an angle. And I'm going to make some adjustments with these strings to make sure that the snares fall away from the head, parallel to the head. So in the off position, the snares are parallel with the head. Once I feel good about that position, I'm going to lock this down for now. So on this side, they're falling straight parallel with the drum. With the butt plate side, I've got a little bit of a tilt that I think is because I've got a little too much slack in the line on one side. So we're just going to loosen this just enough to where it still has some friction, but I'm going to pull this up. Pull that up. Let's see. There we go. Get that to where that's even as well. All right. Now that I feel good about that, I'm going to tighten those all the way down. Again, be careful with over tightening this. These use a drum key to tighten, so you don't run the risk of stripping out a screw head, but still, you don't want to over tighten and strip the threads. All right, now I'm going to put a nice little knot in there. The knot, really, if you do this right, the knot is just a double check in case either the butt plate or the snare strainer side accidentally lose tension on those keys. You've got the knot there to just hold things in place enough to maybe get you through the song or get you through the set. All right, so those are all falling parallel. Let's see. All right, and remember, I left myself a lot of extra room on the top side with this strainer. So now I can already tell when I tighten the strainer up, it's a little on the loose side, which is fine. Now, I'm going to make one change. I'm going to see if I can bring it in. Now that I've got this tied in a knot, I'm actually going to see if I can bring this in a little bit on the butt plate side. So I'm just going to loosen this up. Enough to where there's friction but not tension. Pull this a little bit and lock it down a little more. Again, I'll make sure that it's parallel with the drum there. So it's just this dance of that's good. That's nice. So now that I've got it on there, I look at the bottom and I want to make sure that when the snares are pulling, that they're pulling straight. So when this thing lets off, it's you'll notice it actually comes a little closer to the butt side of the butt plate side of the drum. When I apply the tension, it actually pulls the snares to the bottom head and it pulls it toward the strainer side just a little bit. So right now they're pretty close to even on the bottom of the drum. So if it were too far to one side or the other, I would have to over tension this knob to get a nice balanced snare sound. See what it sounds like with a stick here. Use my thumb to approximate what some kind of moon gel or a ring or something might do. And now that I feel like I've got it where I want it, I'll tighten it up a good bit. Still getting good snare response even as I get tighter. I'll sort of over tighten the snares. It closes up pretty good. Yeah, I'm starting to feel maybe that's where they're a little too tight. Yeah, probably a little too tight, but it's still a nice even pull. So, if anything, I'll just buy. Now, one of the reasons why we use, 25, 26, or even 42 strand snares on a much deeper drum like this is you got a lot more distance between where you're actually striking the drum and what you're trying to vibrate to make that snare drum sound. So having more of those on the bottom makes it a lot more lively and a lot easier to excite the snares if there's more of them. The one thing I will tell you about the black chrome or the black over brass is that it's very susceptible to fingerprints. If you're one of those OCD people that don't like fingerprints, you may not like that too much about this drum. I don't too much mind. Nobody sees that when I'm recording, so it's easy enough to clean these drums up with just a polishing rag. Once I do that, I tell you, just in my hands, it's a fairly solid build. It feels really good. Like a really sturdy workhorse kind of drum. I will say this, in all honesty, does it have the premium feeling of something like a Ludwig Black Beauty? Maybe not. But for $860, I would want to feel some premium in my hands. I would want the drum, whether it's the fit and finish of the lugs or the snare strainer or something about a premium drum in your hands. It's just between looking at the drum and holding the drum, you feel like you're holding your money. In this case, this doesn't feel like a $300 drum. As someone who owns a few Black Beauties and some other really expensive drums, Does it have that premium feel to it? Not so much so. It feels like a workhorse, which I'm totally fine with. My thing is durability, build quality. The sound obviously has got to be great, and how fun is it to play? You know, is this drum going to be a fun drum to play overall? And am I going to have a good time playing it? Well, that's what we're going to find out in our next video. So that video was all about how to put this drum together, and even with the one little difficulty of having to Dremel out a few holes to get the hardware to fit on correctly, even with that little bit of drama, this was not a real difficult build. You just have to take your time to make sure that you do it right, that you don't over tighten things, that you don't rush and cross thread things. Just take your time and use a little bit of common sense. I mean, I really didn't have to do very much other than Dremel out those two little holes. I didn't have to do very much to put this drum together at all. Super easy. All in all, so far I'd give this thing, I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. And that's only because I had to go and find my Dremel and charge it up. And there were a few of those screws that to tighten the tube lugs to the actual shell. A few of them I had to put a little bit of extra torque into. It didn't feel like it went in quite as easy as it should have. So I'm going to give, as far as the construction of this and how I feel about all of it, I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. Is that worth an extra $100 to save and not buying, say, the pork pie, which has a very similar quality of shell and similar type of hardware? I liked building this. Worth it to spend more than twice as much for, say, the Black Beauty version of this? Well, for what I'm going to use this drum for and the amount of time I'm going to spend playing it, overall I'm not going to see that much more value. So for me, in adding this to my arsenal of snare drums and having one more 8x14 option for the things that this does, this is a great value. So $298 is a great price. So that's the second video in this series for the Studio Test Kitchen on the 8x14 drumsupply.com do-it-yourself snare drum kit. I hope you learned a lot. Again, I didn't want to make this super glossy and tell you that everything is beautiful. This one was a little bit of work to put together. Not that you'll have the same thing happen with yours. It just was for me, and that was my experience with it. But overall, I'm totally cool with it so far. The real test comes next. So in the next video, we're going to take this down to the studio and I'm going to play it for you at a variety of tensions. We're going to do low, medium, and high tunings, really take it to its paces, see what kind of sounds we can get out of it, both wide open and damped. Before I get out of here, I want to make sure to mention our sponsor, Session Ace. Go to sessionace.com for anything you may need in the studio or even live, from in-ear monitors to microphones, to a whole assortment of other very, very useful accessories. Session Ace are some remarkable tools for musical craftsmen. I use Session Ace in-ear monitors and the whole lineup of products every single day in the studio and on every single gig that I play, and I really love them. They're fabulous. So check them out at sessionace.com. Thanks again for watching episode number 2 of the Studio Test Kitchen. If you liked what you saw, if you got a ton of value out of it, make sure you hit the subscribe button at the bottom, ding the bell for notifications every time there's a brand new video. Share this and tell your friends about this new program here on my YouTube channel. And that's all I got for you today. Until the next episode, I guess I'll see you when I see you.